Hello everyone. So I just published the first alpha version for React Unforget, which is a community alternative for React Forget. And as you may know, React Forget or React Compiler has been in the works for a couple of years. And personally, I needed something like React Forget for a long time. And I waited and waited, but nothing came out. So I decided to make a community alternative for it. And yeah, here's the result of my attempt. And this wasn't my first attempt. My first attempt dates back to 2020, early 2020, when I created Vidact, which is a compiler that converts your React code into vanilla JS without any virtual DOMs. But that was obviously very difficult to implement. But React Unforget is different. It's still React. So just to give you a quick intro, React Unforget is a compiler that optimizes your code in the build time and improves the performance and readability of your code. So let's say today you have a complex component that re-renders a lot and has a lot of a very complex component hierarchy. So you have to use memo and memo hooks to make sure that you're minimizing the number of re-renders. But that leads to a lot of clutter in your code. And still, the performance is not perfect because it's not very intuitive to also separate JSX elements and memorize them separately. And what I mean by that is literally taking every single JSX element and store it in a variable that is memoized using useMemo. But React Unforget can do it for you automatically. So your code probably looks like this today. So you have memo, use callback, and it's just too much clutter. With React Unforget, however, you don't need all these, and the compiler does it for you. And even it does more than this. It memoizes all the JSX elements. Now let's see it in action. So I have this basic component that has a state, and there's a text that the word even or odd is appended to it based on the state being an even number or an odd number. And there's also a callback here. There's a button with a function that updates the state, just increments the state. Now, if I try it, like it's very straightforward. If the number is odd, it says the number is odd and prints the count. So it's very straightforward, but there's no memoization. I haven't used callback for this. I haven't memoized text. And yeah, now let's see how React Unforget optimizes this code. So this is the Unforget result. This is the code that Unforget creates. And as you can see, it has the same behavior as the original code. So as you can see, it added a hook call to the component. Use create cache Unforget. That is a hook that comes from React Unforget runtime. And it is a function that receives the size of a cache. So for example, for this component, we needed a cache of size 9. We have 9 variables that can change across different re-renders. And yeah, you can see that it allocated the space number 1 to state, number 2 to set state, and 3 to text. And there's a bunch of unwrapped stuff. So as for unwrapped, the first one, you can see that the use state value is getting assigned to the unwrapped variable. And for state, you can see that we start with the cached value, and then we check if unwrapped has changed. If unwrapped has a different value from the cache value, then update state. Same thing for set state. It starts with the cache value and then checks if the cache value of unwrapped, which is a dependency for this, is different, then update set state as well. And same thing for text. It starts with the cache value. So you can see number 3. Number 3 is for text. So it uses that by default. And if it checks if state has changed, then update text. So text has a dependency on state. It may not be apparent from this statement alone, because it doesn't have a dependency in here. But later on, you can see that text changes based on the state value. So it knows it beforehand. And then later on, it checks if state changed, just re-execute this if statement that updates text. And yeah, the next one is unwrapped J6EL, which again, its default value is that of the cache value, and checks if set state or state have changed, then update it. And it's basically the callback that we had for the button. So we have that, and then we have the button itself that has a dependency on the callback itself. So it says if the unwrapped JSX value has changed, update the button, and so on. Like you can see for span, we're checking the state change. And for the div with the span and text, we check if the text has changed or the span have changed. Then update it. And same thing for the outer div. So for the outer div, it checks if the button has changed or the inner div have changed. Then update it. And at the end, you can see that it calls unforget commit. It basically commits all those changes that we made to the cache. So you see this .e method calls. This basically enqueues an update to the cache. So it doesn't update the cache immediately, but just stores it in the queue. And at the end, if we commit it, it just goes over all of those and commits it. I've included some visual representation of the dependency graph that Unforget uses under the hood. And if you click on this, you'd see this visual representation. And it shows how different segments, different code segments are dependent on each other. So as you can see, we have the use state one here, the use state code segment, and it has two dependents. There is the state variable declaration and set state variable declaration. So that means that ultimately these two need to be updated when use state gets updated. And same thing for unwrapped JSX-EL, which is the callback for updating state. And as you can see, it needs both set state and state. So it has a dependency on both of these. And the next thing is the span. It has a dependency on state because it prints the state. And the button has a dependency on this callback. This div has a dependency on the inner div and the button. And this inner div prints text. So it has a dependency on text, but text itself has different type of dependencies, which I call mutation dependencies. So that means that these two statements will mutate text. I showed this with dotted lines as opposed to solid lines. That means mutation dependencies. And yeah, this is the result of the dependency graph analysis that is done by Unforget. And there is so much complexity to it. And I had to study discrete math for that again. But anyways, yeah, this is the analysis part of it. And you can just update this code and it would just automatically also update the dependency graph visualization here if you're curious how it works. If you go to the React Unforget documentation, you would find a few more examples. For example, this alias analysis problem. You can see how React Unforget handles that, which is a complex problem. And specifically this one, which is conditional. And even I have more complex ones in the unit tests of React Unforget if you're curious. So if you go to packages, Babel plugin, source, tests, fixtures, you would find some more complex code fixtures. Okay, so when I was working on React Unforget, I was looking for some apps that have some thorough end-to-end testing that I can test React Unforget with, just to make sure that nothing breaks when you apply React Unforget. And I came across this app made by Cypress called Cypress Real World App, which is something they made just to demonstrate how you can use Cypress testing for a real world application. And I thought this is a good opportunity for me to use this and just apply React Unforget to it, build it, and see if the Cypress tests pass. And this is exactly what I did. So I just cloned the repo, Cypress Real World App, and I installed the Babel plugin for React Unforget and configured Vite to use the Babel plugin. And yeah, that was pretty much all I had to do. And for one of the tests, just to be honest with you, I had to add this weight, and I'm not quite sure why. Like when I was using the app myself, everything was working normally. And I figured it's not able to click on this button, or actually it could click on the button. I mean, Cypress, it clicked on the button and it went to the next page. But for some reason, the navigation happened so quickly after using React Unforget that it failed somehow. But anyways, I figured if I just tell Cypress to wait, it doesn't fail anymore. But from the user standpoint, nothing broke. I intentionally removed React Unforget runtime just to show you that it is in fact using React Unforget Babel plugin. So if I just run yarn dev, you see that it says React Unforget runtime is not installed and it cannot use it. So if I just stop this and add it, if I go back, you can see the app runs. Now I'm just going to run Cypress as well, and I'm going to run some of the end-to-end tests, or all of it. So yeah, as you can see, it is running smoothly and all the tests are passing. And with that exception that I told you that needed this extra weight, but yeah, it is working, which is great. So that means that at least in some of the real world applications, it can be used today. There might be some edge cases that I'm not aware of, and I've made it so that if it fails in analyzing some components, it just gracefully ignores it. But for this particular app, the Cypress Real World application, all the components are actually getting transformed. So nothing breaks the Babel plugin. So yeah, 58 tests are passing, which is great. And yeah, that is pretty much it. I just want to show you how React Unforget works, how it performs in a real world application. I'll probably post an update on the impact on performance as well. And the next step for me is I'm thinking about making an SWC plugin as well. So it's not just Babel, because I know that many applications are now using SWC as opposed to Babel. So I'm just going to polish this Babel plugin, and at the end, once I'm sure that this approach is working, I can work on the Rust version. And thanks for watching this video.